Oh.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's special edition NATS Chat. I am Kari Reagan, the moderator of NATS Chats, which are sponsored by Inside View Press. And I'm so pleased to welcome here tonight Dr. Julio Rosario, who is the husband of our esteemed colleague, Joan Lader. Joan, you have to say hi now that you're there. Say hi to everyone.
I'm here.
We are so
hi,
happy.
everybody.
Oh. And Joan, as we get started here, do you want to just say anything to our singers in this time of COVID-19?
I just want to say that I think that in my experience, everyone has been great. They are moving with the punches. They are eager to learn. They're not panicking. I've got many sick students because it's spread through many Broadway casts. They're getting better. They can't wait to be able to donate their plasma, as they say. So it's been very interesting, and it's such a scary time, but it has not impeded their growth in any way. And as a matter of fact, instead of just working on specifics from each one of these shows, we get a chance to really cross-train. And they're really excited about it. Also to learn, they're much more interested in anatomy. They're more interested in physiology. They want to know, what do we do to make this sound? So it's been rewarding. I think it's harder for us as teachers in the sense that it's exhausting and it's hard to stare at the screen. You know, I've seen many, Carrie, I talked about this today, people are saying, my God, my voice is so tired. And it's kind of, you feel like you're in a stage and your audience is far away from you, and it's very hard to regulate that and realize it can be intimate. But I think that seniors are just an incredible population, and they're going to be fine.
Good. Oh, thank you, Joan. I'm so pleased that you popped on to say hi to everybody. It'll mean a lot to all of our attendees. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take it away.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to welcome my dear friend Yvette Litchfield, who is a beautiful soprano and therapist, and I'll have her introduce herself momentarily. And then Darrel Jordan, a fabulous baritone, who is ABD, all but dissertation at the University of Washington. And before you all introduce yourselves, our fabulous president of NATS, Karen Brunson, wants to just say a few words.
I want to say welcome to the 7th of these special NATS chats that are really a response to the crisis that we're all going through in all of our many different ways. It's been exciting on the other side to see that we're so caring and that we have such great resources through NATS to help us. And I say that as somebody who has taken a lot from every one of these NATS chats. I needed it more than some of anybody else, to be very honest. And the NATS community is a NATS family. We've really felt that. We've made new friends through this, even through the chats. When you put a question on a chat, we get to know those things, and we get to know the heart of people who are singing. And that really is what NATS is about. So I want to say thank you to Kari Reagan and to Alan Henderson for putting these together. And I want to say thank you to all 28 or plus, maybe even more presenters that have shared their expertise so willingly. This is what I find to be the truth in NATS, is that if you ask somebody to do something, they jump to do it. And I have literally never had anybody that I've had to ask in my role as president say no. And this is just an extension of the spirit that we want to continue to have with NATS. So thank you to everybody for coming. Also, we had great attendance at every one of these. And let's hope that we're back together live and in person too. But in the meantime, we really have this ship sailing, and let's keep it going. My best to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, so much. So tonight we're going to talk about protecting the singer's self-identity during COVID-19 crisis. And just as a way of introducing yourself, Dr. Rosario, just tell us a little bit about, besides being the husband of the fabulous Joan Lader, you're here tonight as a therapist. So tell us a little bit about about your work or
Okay, I'm Julio Rosario. I have two jobs actually. I work with special ed children, with the special needs children in the Jersey City school system. That's one job. I'm the one that evaluates them, consults with parents, teachers. So I've got that education side. And then I maintain a private practice in New York. It's obviously very limited because of my time. My other job is a full-time job. And luckily, I have most of my patients are performers. Performers, to me, singers are performers. So I use the word performers. I think a lot of words are used synonymously. The benefit I have is that I myself was a performer. I stopped singing back in 1987. And I still do identify as a singer. Even my anxiety dreams are veiled in theater terms. Missing the performance. So I'm running late and I hear someone else singing what I know in my dream I have been rehearsing. Or better still, having practiced, rehearsed an opera and suddenly arriving and they say, oh, it's a ballet. And in my dream, I say, oh, okay. And somehow in my dream, I managed to get through. So it's I do feel that being in the theater, being in the performing arts, being a singer is a life lesson. Anything that I've learned has served me well in many, many, many more aspects of my life than I ever expected.
Oh, thank you. Well, I can't wait to hear more insights tonight. And joining us from Australia is Yvette Litchfield. So Yvette, I, of course, know a great deal about you as one of my dearest friends, but share a bit about who you are in the world as a former therapist.
Well, I'm a classically trained singer, and I was inspired to train as a therapist many years ago. Really, the genesis of this inspiration, I think, was tracks back to my days at the Guildhall, when I myself and several of my fellow singers found ourselves in situations where our therapeutic needs weren't really being met by the counsellors on hand. So back then, my singing teacher Yvonne Kenny's best provision was in the form of an Alexander technician, who was, I would say, somewhat spiritual almost in her approach, but that was the best I could get therapeutically. And many years later, as you know, we conferred, and what was born was, I suppose, the performing artist or the singer's counsellor or therapist in me. So here we are, and I deal with the many different aspects of the singer's needs. In particular, at this moment, I suppose the potential sense of loss and grief and the singer's crisis of identity in the face of this pandemic. I won't say crisis, because crisis infers perhaps that this is a moment and it's finite. And as we're seeing, this pandemic is now looking like less of a moment and more of an ongoing pandemic, and something that we might see coming in waves. So it's really important for singers to be building resilience and to be encouraged to, first of all, have these issues that they're contending with and the feelings that they're contending with validated, and that they have a sense that their identity can be maintained. So we'll get to those things later.
We will get to those things, and what a perfect segue as our singer representative and DJ, who also is a voice teacher, but is a working singer out in the country. So DJ, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself to us? You to us? Yes, that was right.
Sure. My name is Darrel Jordan. I go by DJ. I am ABD, as you said, at the University of Washington, a student of Dr. Kari Reagan. My dissertation is exploring recognizing fear in voice students and then looking at different strategies on how to mitigate that fear. And yeah, and I'm a working teacher and singer, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, DJ. And he also has a bachelor's degree in psychology. So he's right in there combining all of this as well. So let's launch into some broad strokes first about dealing with trauma around the COVID, as Yvette already yielded to talking about anger, grief, anxiety, loss, due to the loss of performances and the change in our daily lives. So Yvette, would you like to lead us off a little bit around just some broad strokes around that topic?
Well, I think singers' worlds have suddenly changed radically. They've been fundamentally altered by coronavirus. They've suffered significant financial losses, and I think that's one of the most important things to acknowledge. And their daily experience of singing has been altered in every way. The validation and the feedback that singers are used to getting from their colleagues and their audiences has been in large part removed. And the joy that they derive from singing with others has also been removed from their daily experience. Neuroscience tells us that when we sing as a group, we release oxytocin. Singing itself releases endorphins, but singing with others releases what we call the cuddle hormone, or the bonding hormone. And this is such a it's one of the reasons why we experience such joy in singing. That sense of purpose that we get from from what it is that we do, our sense of identity, that structure and routine of going to our jobs, our college, our environment, our working environment, into the opera house or the rehearsal space or our singing lesson, that belonging and community, the social aspect of being with our colleagues, all of these things are now things that we're now doing in isolation. We're practicing in isolation, whether at home or at the opera house. I'm hearing tell of, in Germany, singers who are being told that they may go to, for example, the opera house, because a lot of singers can't in Germany practice at home, but they have to go one by one to the opera house. So a lot of singers have lost that collegiate sense of checking in, and that crucial set of ears. Singers' voices reside unseen in their bodies, and particularly for singers, and this is perhaps relevant for this talk, because we're perhaps dealing with a lot of singers who are developing their sense of we might have a lot of student singers who are developing their sense of vocal identity. They might be at a formative stage of development. Not all of the singers that we're talking to today will necessarily be professional. And if you are at a formative stage of your development, you're really dependent on those other sets of ears for your sense of what kind of a voice do I have, not just my fach, but where am I at in my development, and how am I going, and how is my voice today, and did I sing well, and am I okay, and that feedback, and how was my practice sesh today, and from colleagues, you know, and we're not getting that affirmation and that validation that allays our anxiety, you know, and I think that's very difficult. It's very difficult to have that internal dialogue entirely in isolation. We're very self-critical anyway as singers, and to be having that dialogue entirely alone is a very, very difficult thing to do. So we do depend on external sets of ears, and if we're going to be developing, we need external sets of ears. So it's really important now that singers continue to have their lessons online if they're going to continue to develop. But we've lost that feedback, the community, the interactions, the validation that comes from an income. So yeah, the connection that we have, really importantly, through music making. That connection isn't something that we can really replicate online. And I think it's really important to validate that. The online platform is something that represents many wonderful creative opportunities, but it's not a replacement for the magic of live performance. It's really important to validate that loss.
Thank you. Julio, how about what thoughts do you have as we start here talking just a little bit about the feelings of anger and grief and anxiety that this is bringing up?
Well, yeah, I totally agree with Yvette. You know, what I find in working with many of the clients that I see, it's very interesting at this moment. It all depends on the level these people were at. They're all unemployed. Broadway has shut down. Contracts have been canceled. I had a patient who was actually in rehearsal for a major show opening in one of our at the Paper Mill Playhouse out here in New Jersey, and suddenly they've gone into suspension. Everything has stopped. None of my people are they're concerned about their incomes. Of course, but that seems to be, they all seem to be handling it. No one seems to be getting hysterical from it. They have found other ways of expressing their creativity, because we're also talking about creativity here. I mean, singing, performing, you need an audience. You must have an audience. There's no two ways of, it's very satisfying when, it's very interesting. I had in my career, there were very, very few performances where I sang at 100%. Even Beverly Sills once said that you can't always sing at 100%. And it was almost an orgasmic feeling, but it was the same thing as knowing I aced a test. I knew when I aced a test. I knew when at that specific moment in the performance, I had it. All right? There were few and far between, and I can never replicate it. You never knew when it was coming. But internally, I knew it. The audience just added to it, augmented it. But clinically, what I find is many of my clients, their issues are much more human, much more. It's much more expansive. It doesn't begin or end with their identity as singers or performers. I think there's a wonderful article that was in the Harvard Business Review called "The Discomfort You're Feeling Now, You're Feeling is Grief." It's grief. It was done by it was an interview with Dr. Kessler, done by a guy named Scott Bernardo. You can get it online. And basically, he posits that we are, as humans, and I apply this, and of course it does apply to singers. They always come. It's very interesting. I have civilians, and I have what I call civilians, people who are not performers, and I have performers, singers, actors. Many of them, on Broadway, you do all of it, and they're not that very different. They're not that very different. So Dr. Kessler is saying we, as I'll call it a civilization, are grieving. There's a lack of normalcy. There's a lack of control. We've lost our safety net. We're not the only, everyone has lost income.
Right.
Many people are unemployed, as reflected in, 3.28 million people have applied for unemployment. We have the highest unemployment
ever in the history.
Ever, close to the Depression. But somehow our primitive selves know something is going on. We do not know what it is. It's the boogeyman is coming. We don't get it, and we're scared. And so there are ways, around. He does recommend ways around it. But I do agree with practically everything you said. But that's a very specific population. They're not. It's very just in my practice. They're not very different than the civilian. They do bring a unique set of issues that civilian doesn't have, and that's I hate working with that conductor. I hate working with that director. Why don't they? I could have sung that role, or I went to that audition. I sang just as well as the 50 people who auditioned, but I didn't get it. Well, it happens that performing is one of those businesses where 1 and 1 does not equal 2. You can have 50 people in the room, all have the same qualifications, and the reaction to them is subjective. But that's something that is the nature of the beast. All of my, it's accepted. You go from job to, your job is to go from job to job, contract to contract, Broadway show to Broadway show, opera house to opera house. But I think everything that my performers are going through is what it seems that all of humanity is going through at this moment. The boogeyman's knocking on the door. We don't know who it is.
I want to say to our attendees, there is a chat box, and I have, thanks to Rhonda Klein in the background, put the article in the chat box, so you'll find a direct link to the article that Julio just mentioned. So thank you, Rhonda. So DJ, as our singer representative today, although you're many things, including the teacher, as we discussed, share with us your feelings about what they've just said, and does that resonate with you, I'm sure, right now?
Oh, absolutely. Well, Dr. Rosario, you're totally right in that we're all suffering an income hit, but it's almost not it's not the first thing I wake up and think about. Before COVID-19, my routine would be wake up, what am I going to practice? What am I going to memorize? What are my due dates for memorization for the, performances that I was lucky to have in the next couple of months? And now I have this lack of, or this lack of self, kind of. I wake up and I say, well, I can practice. What's the point? I don't have anything for 6 months anymore. And I'm teetering this line of, what will my career look like in 6 months versus what will my health look like in 6 months? And I almost feel like I have to make a choice between those two.
Explain that more, DJ.
Sure. Well, I feel like right now, and I've been talking to a number of colleagues, singer friends too, that we're unsure if we're going to get the virus. And I know we're young, but that doesn't mean anything really. So we're stuck between this kind of teetering the line of, are we going to be placed in a position where we have to choose not just our health in terms of COVID-19, but our mental health as well, of, do we need to change careers, even if just temporarily? And that's heartbreaking, is because so many of us have spent years sacrificing to become, to be a musician, to be a working, active musician. And now that's, it's the rug's being pulled out from under us right now. And it's not just musicians, it's many fields.
Right. And yeah, we acknowledge that whilst we're talking about our own field, of course. One of the things that I keep hearing from all of you, and that I've heard in the last few weeks, is that whilst part of us is trying to pivot in our professions to some degree to keep food on the table, that there is a moment that we also need to validate the feelings of the students. And I think maybe even acknowledge that younger generations, some of us are older, of course, and so we might have a little different perspective, that we have to validate and acknowledge and honor the feelings of wherever people are in their stages in this process. Here in Seattle, of course, we're headed into week 5 next week. So maybe some of us have moved more into acceptance mode of this is our new normal, and all right, I'm starting week 5. I'm going to be in a different place than somebody in the country who maybe hasn't even been put down on lockdown yet, where we have been. So anyway, could we all just talk a minute about that, about the validation and the importance of that, or what your thoughts are on that? Julio, go ahead.
Now, I really, I am of the school that any feeling a client has is valid. Valid for them. It is not up to me to judge or to decide whether it's how important it is or not in the grand scheme of things. It is important to them. So I mean, I will never deny that feeling. The goal always is, well, at least when you're doing therapy, is to get the individual to function, to deal with it, look at it, examine it. Is it a reality or is it their perception? Are they having what Kessler calls anticipatory grief? In other words, are they catastrophizing? Are they extending? Are they getting so out of today and the moment and going into the future? The future is totally unknown. As we know, the past cannot be corrected. Guess what? We're stuck. The future is unknown. Stick it into a computer and you'll get 1,000 permutations of what the future can possibly be. You have to stay in the present. And that anticipatory grief, which is that primitive side of us that's, oh my God, it's like, I always think of Chicken Little, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. We need to get away from that sort of, that's real anxiety, which can turn into clinical anxiety. And that then you have no control. But there are cognitive ways of dealing with it. But right now, it's sort of we're catastrophizing. We know that things, like you said, things are going to change. 9/11 is the best example. Right now, think about it. Prior to 9/11, going in and out of security with bags was no big deal. Of course, they went through your bags every now and then just to make sure you didn't have a leather jacket that you paid $1,000 for. But now it became very, very stringent. The way we travel today changed totally after 9/11.
Absolutely.
We still have people who are traumatized after 9/11 because they're afraid of crowds. Well, this COVID-19 is going to do the same thing. We don't know how much. That's the problem. We don't know how much of our lives it's going to change. Are they not going to allow people into a concert hall? Or something crazy, if you think about it, are they going to be jumping seats, one seat empty, one seat full in a concert house? That would be crazy. That would cut down the size of the audience. So we don't know how it's going to actually affect us at this moment. And that's the fear we have. We live not knowing what's going to happen. Though we do realize that it is affecting us. Yes, it is. But do we change how we function? I'm afraid I don't want to say it should. We should be safe. We shouldn't be stupid. I hate to use that word. Be smart. A better word. Let's be smart about it. But let's wait and see how our lives will change, and we must deal with it. And I never ever deny those feelings. It's not up to me to decide that they're silly or not, or it's invalid. I cannot and will not invalidate someone's feelings until we discuss them.
Julio, so since we've temporarily lost Yvette, I think she might have a technical issue. Let me ask you this. Are there steps or questions that a singer might ask themselves to know when that Chicken Little, the sky is falling, might need a therapist's guidance? What do they need to know in that process of asking for help?
Well, I'm of the school. I do believe that everyone should be in therapy. Everyone. It gives you some place of safety where you can talk about your feelings, because all of us tend to, and again, it's a generalization, but many of us tend to put our feelings aside and we edit them.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to we invalidate ourselves. And we go, oh, that hurts. I feel very uncomfortable. But no, that's really not important. Now, today I feel better, because that's usually what happens. And people never come to me for therapy because they have plenty of time on their hands, have plenty of money, and they want to know why they hate their mothers at that particular, all these, I hate my mother. It's always, there was that time in therapy where everybody hated their mother. It was mom's fault, everything. They come because something's going on in their lives where they can't function. It's getting in their way. Singers deal, the mere fact that you're in the performing arts, you face every day a slap in the face. You must audition. You must audition. And you can't I really do believe that the singer is the instrument. We can't, it's not like a violin where you put it in a case and you put it in the closet. We can't. We are the instrument. And so it's very difficult when people say, don't take it personally, to not take it personally. Reject me, you reject my art. And you reject my art, you're actually rejecting me. It's a hard thing to separate the two, to compartmentalize the two. It really is. Mm-hmm. And, I do believe that everyone should have someplace safe, because remember, your therapist, number one, they take the laws. You are protected by confidentiality. They're not your friend. Going to your friends for advice is great, but they advise you as a friend. Whereas a therapist, look, I care for my clients, I really do, and you get to like them. You really you know them intimately. I probably know most of my clients more intimately than their spouses do, but I'm not their friend. Mm-hmm. I am not their friend. I don't advise. My goal is to sit there, hold the hand, let's go down this journey together. I will step into your shoes to see if I can experience what you're feeling. I have my reaction to what you're saying. You will have your reaction to me. I sound like your father. I've actually had that one said. It's interesting you said that, because my father said exactly the same thing. And it's that journey we take together. And the goal always is to make you self-sufficient, to make you able to function on your own, to get over that hump, regardless of whatever it is. And I find a lot of performers are basically angry people. Why? It's a dreadful thing to have to deal with every day, the ups and downs. I always say, I tell people, you have to have a face of stone to survive, and not say, I give up, gloves off, I'm out. And it takes a lot to stay in there and stick, but that stick-to-itiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yvette, how about you mentioned about the validating of feelings. Is there anything else you wanted to expand on about that? Oh, hang on, Yvette, we're not hearing you. Just turn on your little mic, Ike.
My apologies there. I lost connection for a moment earlier, so I missed some of the priceless gems that Dr. Rosario just said. So I hope you don't find me repeating some of what you just said. So please forgive me if I do. Just a little disclaimer here. So for me, I, like yourself, therapeutically, one of the most important, the first thing you said was that you're in the business of validating your client's feelings, Dr. Rosario, and completely agree with you there. One of the things I find I work with in my private practice with clients, and also in the psychiatric hospital where I work with the general population, is the stressing of what I call non-judgmental noticing of our feelings. And that is my definition of mindfulness. And that is the validation of how we feel. And I think this is critical for singers right now, that in this period, this sustained period of the COVID pandemic, that singers give themselves the space to notice non-judgmentally how they're feeling, and give themselves time and space to notice how they're feeling, give themselves this due before they leap into problem-solving mode, or feel that they need to reframe or
Right.
move on. They may not be ready to reframe. There may be a lot of singers who say, "I'm not ready to pivot. Thanks for the offer, but I'm not ready to pivot. I'm in grief, and I need to be here for a while. I need to sit with this." Okay. Actually, that would be good. Actually, a client who notices and observes that is a client who is observing their feelings, and they're in touch with that. Some clients are going to be in such fear that they're going to want to jump over their terror into problem-solving mode. They run the risk of getting into a state of either a sense of complete hopelessness and loss of motivation, and losing 10 or more years of investment, as DJ said, in this hard-won career, and saying, "I give up," because pivoting too soon isn't going to necessarily get them the results they wanted. Trying to problem solve their way into, "I can do this, damn it. I can convert into online. I can make this work. I can problem solve my way into creative ways of being a singer. I can do this. I'm terrified, but I can reframe this." And you can imagine all the adrenaline, but they're just refusing to acknowledge the grief and so on. And they're trying to sing through all this tension, and they may end up with vocal injury, or at least vocal dysphonia. They're singing in tension. They're probably furious. And remember, anger and anxiety are each one half of the fight, flight, freeze response. So they've got huge amounts of cortisol, huge amounts of adrenaline, which is exhausting. Yeah. And so if we continue to have all of this adrenaline and cortisol charging, we're exhausted, yeah, and our bodies are eventually, if we continue to deny our anger, deny our anxiety, we're fueling huge amounts of exhausting energy. We're denying it. "No, I'm fine, I'm problem solving, I'm awesome, I'm good, I'm creative, I can do this, I can problem solve my way through this." They're denying, they're not noticing their emotions, they're not being mindful, they're doing their utmost as performers. The show must go on, yeah, and as singers we've been trained not to be mindful in many ways. Show must go on after all, yeah, and CCM singers might relate to this perhaps even more than the classical singers. So for those of you who are thinking today, where's the CCM singer representing us? Well, I'm speaking to you now. You might really relate to this. Those of you who've done 6, maybe even 10 shows a week are thinking, "Yep, I'm hearing you. I remember this. I'm trained to sing through my anxiety, my fury at, unfair conditions. And right now I'm feeling pumped and I'm thinking, yeah, I can do this. I can be creative. I can pivot." Yeah, well, this could result in vocal dysphonia on the other side of COVID. You could have goodness knows what going on with your vocal cords.
It's one of the attendees is typing in, "Yvette, you're describing me to a T," and of course you know me very, very well. So as you're discussing, you have to be thinking of me, because that would be my my attack. I was raised by a pragmatic woman. You
Right.
put the bootstraps on, and I mean,
Right.
and you get going.
And you know what happens on the other side of this? Not just vocal injury, but you know what we do when we do this to ourselves? We suppress anger and we suppress anxiety, depression, because our body cannot cope with all of that adrenaline. And it dials down sensitivity to stimuli because it just can't cope with being constantly in fight, flight, or freeze. As I say, anger and anxiety are each one half of the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. So it dials down sensitivity to stimuli because otherwise it's constantly being activated. So in dialing down sensitivity to stimuli, it doesn't discriminate what the stimuli is. So it's dialing down sensitivity to all stimuli, positive as well as negative. So we're seeing the world in grey, which is essentially depression. The world is just becoming muted. So at the end of the day, when these beautiful creative people who are used to an electric kind of multicolored, very beautiful way of seeing the world, seeing the world in technicolor in effect, suddenly on the other side of COVID, you're going to end up very depressed. So it's dangerous not to be mindful at this time. Give yourself your due. Allow for your feelings. Allow yourself to notice without judgment how you are feeling. And remember, your emotions are a physiological experience. Notice how you are feeling them in your body. Notice the tension, especially around here. Because otherwise you are apt to start getting tension in here, tongue root tension, mandibular tension, tension in. And now, DJ, please speak to us all about where you might be feeling it.
I feel like you described, especially my 20s, to a T. That was me. No, what you both said was exactly what I've been thinking, not in all those terms. Something I was telling Dr. Reagan is to super simplify this, as I've been saying to myself, to my students more, and then trying to say it to myself, is I need to allow myself space and grace.
Oh, beautiful.
Which is, easier to tell someone to do it than to allow yourself to do that.
Yeah, it's really painful.
Yeah.
No, sorry, DJ, please continue.
I was done.
Well, it's interesting. Ellen Fall was she was the Juilliard Emeritus head of voice there for many, many years and was my beloved teacher. And I'll share very briefly a personal story where my best friend had died of AIDS in 1992, and I had flown back to New York to be by his side for the end of life. And I came back to Seattle, and I was young. I had gone through quite a trauma, but I will never forget receiving a phone call from Miss Fall. Back then we had phone calls, and she said, "Kari, darling, I will see you for your lesson at noon on Friday." Okay, Miss Fall, I'll see you then. I had no desire to sing. And her husband, ironically, Julio, was a therapist. So you and Joan remind me of that. And she used to joke about her clients would go from her office to his office, all these opera singers. But I will never forget that gesture of kindness to me, that in a time, because he was a singer, dancer, actor, so hugely talented, the last thing on my mind was singing, and yet this beloved voice teacher of mine didn't give me a choice, and it was the right call to make. So I find it interesting, somewhere between sitting with the group, which is what you guys are talking about, and somebody pulling you forward back into something that will nourish your soul. There's some continuum. Julio, what would you?
Yeah, I was raised by a Puerto Rican mother who spoke no English. She had a second grade education, but she knew the value of education. And the reason I bring her up only is because I always say she was the Nike commercial before the Nike commercial ever came out. Her attitude was, just do it. Don't talk, just do it. Pragmatic approach. it works sometimes. But as we were saying, I say therapy for everyone, because when emotion requires motion, you must sit in it. A lot of people don't like sitting in it. You have to feel it before you can get through it, which I told Yvette. I think am I summarizing you? Am I summarizing that correctly? You got to move. I mean, you've got to feel it. You cannot ignore it. Now, remember that singing is a singer's communication. I am bilingual.
Mhm.
But singing, if you think about it, gave me another way to communicate, which I have put aside, for many reasons, but I still do. But it is a form of communication, and not being able to sing, ultimately, let's say, as a result of the things we've been talking about, and much of it being depression, it starts cutting away, eroding. We were talking about the singer as a singer. If you can no longer communicate in the way you communicate best, then guess what? That's another road to depression, on top of the wearing out of cortisol. I mean, we were talking about cortisol. Cortisol, it's meant for fight or flight. Somebody scares you, the cortisol kicks in. It is not meant to be kicking into you constantly. It spurts. It's as you need it. Someone scares you, something happens, you jump. It is not meant for you to be constantly under stress, being depressed, because what it does is your body cannot handle the overdose of the cortisol, and you wear out. You get sick. You get common cold, many colds, a lot of other things. Suddenly you have people who were never asthmatic becoming asthmatics. It starts going into your muscles, making everything tense, and it starts affecting the one way you communicate. I mean, an important way as a communicator that singers have, which is singing.
Mm.
Ergo, we start therapy for everyone.
I love that. So you guys are leading us nicely into one of the main points I wanted to talk about is the self-identity piece, right, for singers. And I know that we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, specifically you mentioned about living in this capitalist society, and how singers get some validation from being financially paid, but at the end we are singers first. Would you expand on that, because you articulate about it so beautifully?
Well, yeah, it's I've kind of moved away from that, actually. I think that both our panelists today have made a beautiful point that in fact that's not so much where singers are focused at the moment, actually. That funnily enough, it's more about the loss of a sense of purpose, a sense of connection. One of the things that I've come to focus more on in terms of self-identity as it relates to singers now is the sense of the performative and the non-performative identity. I'm aware that where our time is ticking so much that I kind of wanted to come to this, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I feel that this is a really interesting landing for me, and I hope this helps some singers. I feel that now in COVID, perhaps at this time, it's really an opportunity for singers to possibly, I mean, this may be premature. There may be a lot of singers for whom this is just a pivot that they're not ready for. But for those who are ready to hear something along these lines, this is an offering. Singers' identity is composed of more than just the performative identity. We are not always in performance mode. Dr. Rosario was saying we all need an audience, and this is true, but we're not always performing for that audience. That said, when we are in the rehearsal room, very often we are rehearsing for an imagined audience. That's true, right? Would you agree with that, DJ?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we are often harnessing that imagined audience to simulate or to bring on aspects of the fight, flight, freeze response, or to imagine or to try and cultivate a bit of performance anxiety to bring that into the mix. But there are so many non-performative aspects of the singer's identity that we need to cultivate as singers. And I think it's really important for us to validate those and perhaps to invest in them at this time, because so often as singers, we're too busy with the performative aspects of our identity to actually get busy with these other aspects. The maintenance of craft, for example, the building of technique, the preparation of scores and languages and other mental preparation, business, management, marketing, and so forth. And also remember that people will actually have time to listen to what you send out or post online now. So this is good to know, right? But one of the things I wanted to focus on was the fact that singing itself is a built-in self-soothing anxiety therapeutic tool. It activates the vagus nerve, which runs from the neck to the abdomen. We tend to associate singing with two aspects of anxiety: performance anxiety and health anxiety. Yes, health anxiety. Health anxiety is something that's being increasingly researched in Nordic countries where we have a high preponderance of self-employed freelance singers. There's a lot of research being done on what's being called health anxiety, among singers. And there's this sort of voice checking that goes on, this phenomenon called voice checking. And very often for singers, how their day goes and how their relationships go for the day depends on the state of the voice. There's their themselves, there's their relationship with their partner, and there's the relationship with the voice. And how their voice is in the act of voice checking in the morning. It's like, I mean, a lot of singers will relate to this. You get up in the morning, you clear the voice. How's my voice? There's the voice checking that goes on. Yeah, and so there's been research that's been going on about that phenomenon of voice checking and the health anxiety that attends it. How am I today? How's my sinus? How's my voice? Have I got a bit of a cough? Right? And so there's health anxiety and there's performance anxiety, and yes, they do have a relationship. And we associate singing with those two forms of anxiety, and we assume that singing couldn't possibly be anti-anxiety, but actually it is. So, but it isn't when we are harnessing it in the service of the performative aspect of our identity. So if we are harnessing it in the non-performative aspect, if we're dialing down the performative aspect of our identity and we're tuning into the non-performative during COVID, we can be harnessing singing as a self-soothing anti-anxiety therapeutic tool. We can activate this vagus nerve that runs from the neck to the abdomen when we hum, when we engage in deep, slow breathing, through yoga, but similarly when we sing. And as I said before, we also release oxytocin when we sing in groups and other positive hormones. So we have at our disposal something that deactivates the fight, flight, freeze reflex, which will be in full swing given our responses to COVID-19. So I think it's quite powerful to perhaps invest in these many aspects of the non-performative aspects of our identity, and perhaps to conceptualize or reconceptualize our identity. I wonder how that speaks to singers and what you think about that, DJ?
I love the non-performative aspect. I don't think I ever labeled it that way in my mind, but it's great. One way that I've been kind of trying to use singing as a non-performative way is my husband is also a avocational singer.
Right.
And every 2 days or so, because he's working from home now too, he's a physician and not going in. So he'll say, all right, let's sing. And for 10 or 15 minutes, we will just sing together, and there's no performing aspect about it at all. And it's really kind of soothing. And in one kind of warped way, COVID-19 has made me fall in love again with singing. Not that I was falling out with it, but it reminded me why I'm doing what I'm doing in almost the weirdest way. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So, DJ, as a singer, would you then encourage, teachers to, or do lessons need to shift for a little bit? So when we have our lessons, do we need to approach it in a non-performative way? And what would that look like to you? And would that be beneficial to you?
I think that obviously depends student to student, but maybe that really could be beneficial if some part of the lesson, maybe even the end part of the lesson is, and it's over Zoom, so you never know how that will really translate, but maybe let's both sing together, or how about I sing the root and you harmonize over me for 15 seconds, something silly like that, but that could be healing for both the student and the teacher.
I know Joan typed in a while ago that she feels it's often best when you're working online to listen to someone sing and follow it with an exercise in mindfulness, breathing, or movement, and then listen to them sing again. So, I know this chat is more about singers rather than the teachers, but I know there are many teachers on listening as well. And, thinking about how we need to shift during the COVID-19, our lesson time, moving on online, and how we might change the energy and the focus and the intent around it might be an interesting thing to consider.
I guess I just wanted to highlight that it's really important to validate for any professional singers that the non-performative aspect of their identity is just as valid. It is absolutely critical that professional singers understand that the non-performative aspects of their identity are simply something that sometimes get left by the wayside when they're really busy performing. And at this stage, it's simply an opportunity to cultivate those aspects of their identity because they have the time for it. This is an opportunity. Cultivate those things because, frankly, when COVID's over, you will be too busy again to do those marketing materials, pop those things online, do all of those things, because we really do not have time for those things when we're busy performing and we've got those contracts lined up and so forth. Learn a language, get your IPA and so forth learned. And if you're waking up and thinking, what's the point? Well, there are a lot of things you can do for yourself as a professional singer that are not necessarily focused on the performative aspects of your identity. So maybe that reframe could be really helpful for those professional singers who are feeling aimless right now and feeling a little bit hopeless. Framing it in terms of those two aspects of your identity being absolutely equally valid and honing in on those many, many aspects of the non-performative and saying, I feel, I feel really validated as a professional. There are so many aspects of the non-performative that I can focus on right now.
Julio, I'd love to hear your thoughts about identity.
I love everything you're saying, Yvette. I really, really do. I have to say a couple of things. My clients, many of them, what they are doing, and we've worked on this, is you're talking about basically, it's called show business. Well, at least, for Broadway performance, it's called show business. It's show, and then there's a business end. Guess what? You're the tube of toothpaste, and you have to sell it. Now that people are not performing, there is time. You've eliminated a major, there's a lot of time. So now's the time to catch up on your housekeeping, which is basically what you're talking about, building technique, looking at your business management, marketing, even, where am I going? A lot of my clients now are doing things like they're working on organizing cruise shows of their own. It's their time to sit down and explore music. It's their time to reread textbooks. They'd like to go into commercials instead, add that on. And so now all of a sudden they have the time to do it, which is very, very important, because normally we forget that. And I just have to say that when I was singing, what always got me crazy was the self-absorption of singers. It was me, my wife, and La Voce. La Voce from the Holy Trinity. And it would wait on me only because I was one of those that if I ran across the park, I was ready. I was ready to go. And it was vocalized to the point where I always said they're leaving their best notes in the toilet. And it was always me, my wife, and La Voce. And now what you're saying is, let's get away from that. Yeah, you check it every morning. Is it there?
Yeah.
Is it there? No, it's a part of you. But I totally agree with everything you're saying.
I love that.
And I'd love to research some of that health anxiety research that they've done. Really would love to explore some of that.
DJ, any thoughts from you about the identity piece?
Well, to kind of follow up of, the non-performative, or just finding something else to do in the time that we have now, and I did this within our lesson even last week. I brought in 3 new arias, and I thought, well, I don't have work for the next 6 months. Let's maybe learn some new music. I haven't had a chance to learn new music for me, for the sake of me, just wanting to learn it in 7 years. So it was kind of a nice experience.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So finding a little different space all of a sudden. I know as a teacher, I actually have said to several singers, I'm not relieved or happy that this has happened or that they've had contracts taken away. But there's if there's something technical that they want to work on, we have a little more room to do that now. Because when you're always getting ready for the next audition or the next performance or trying to get a new aria in the voice, you don't have that time and space to say, hang on, I kind of want to rework something about their technique. And now I feel like we have the time and space to do that. So I think that's a little bit of what you were alluding to, DJ, that as well, that for you, that was, there's these arias I'd like to kind of play with and I haven't had time to. Someone wants. Where's Joan? Why isn't she answering the phone?
It's Hollywood. No, she's watching this. She's watching this show.
Well, as we have a few more minutes, let's just bring this full circle a little bit. I just kind of a broad, nothing specific, but anything.
I'm going to keep you on because I don't want to miss anything.
Just pause for a minute. Julio gets the phone sorted. Somebody really needs them. Anything around, we've kind of already alluded to it about reframing for our singers, but anyway, just kind of final thoughts or observations. We've talked about validation. We've talked about self-soothing. We've talked about non-performative aspects. That you guys have given us so many wonderful things. But what other thoughts do you have for our singers as we end tonight?
Just a final thought was just there are a lot of singers who don't have the safety net of the opera house contracts, and governments like Germany that are offering the support. I mean, Germany at the moment is offering a minimum of 2,000 euros a month and up to 9,000 euros, depending on, for singers. Depending on their financial situation. And a lot of singers are dealing with an incredible lack of support and in financial insecurity, and they feel really demoralised and unmotivated to continue pursuing the career for which they've fought so hard. And as DJ rightly said, they may be feeling inclined to pursue another career altogether. And I just would really encourage singers where possible to keep up with their singing lessons, support your industry by doing that, because where you very often singers are singing teachers, so where you're keeping up with your singing lessons, you're supporting your industry. You're enabling your industry to continue. Now there are more videos online of musicians doing creative things than ever before. Join these campaigns, join your online community. This participation will help to validate your identity as artists, as singers, to affirm your collective and individual identity, because not all of your governments are doing that for you, as the German government is. So certainly my government isn't. So try not to politicise this chat, but I suppose that's perhaps my last thought. The online medium of connection doesn't replace the magic of the in-person connection that we all know to be such a beautiful thing for singers with our audience, but it is a wonderful adjunct and does open up many creative opportunities. So I would encourage everybody to participate any way you can in that.
Okay, DJ, go ahead. I see.
I've seen a number of my friends, it's been kind of inspirational that they do this thing called Suddenly Opera. And I think it's happening around 5 p.m. and in whatever time zone you're in, and they're going out on their porches to sing a snippet of an aria. Just for, usually no one's outside, so they're just singing it for nature, and it's pretty cool. And there are a ton of virtual choirs. My chamber ensemble, actually today, we did a virtual choir thing, and we posted it, and you're right, it doesn't replace it, but it is a close silver medal right now, and I'll take that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Really glad to hear that. That's really encouraging. And I think for everybody who's watching and who will watch, thanks for sharing that. It's really encouraging.
Julio, final thoughts for you a little bit.
I tell everyone, stay safe, healthy, be smart. Don't tempt the fates. Don't think you're invulnerable. And just keep it together. We will survive this. We will. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, though sometimes it feels like, oh my God, what will it be like tomorrow? Let us not catastrophize. Let us not live in the future, but try to keep our feet in the present, as hard as it may be. I'm not saying, it's like we were talking about the levels of grief before. They're not linear. None of those levels are linear. You can hit the last one and then have to go back. I say I love the idea of the musicians, because it reminds me of Spain and Italy when the people are standing on their balconies and singing. I also have to say, let us stop using the word social distancing.
Thank you.
I think it's a horrible word. Distancing has it's a negative connotation of disconnecting. I'm thinking of some of the pictures I've seen on Facebook where someone is wearing a Civil War ball gown and saying, this is my social distancing, because it's huge petticoats. I prefer physical distancing.
Thank you.
There it means, okay, I go to Whole Food every morning because from 7 to 8 they have oldsters. We go in before everyone else does. They open at 8, and they even mark the floor where when you're standing at the cash register you're 6 feet behind. That's physical distancing. I still can talk to you on the line. I bump into my neighbors down in the laundry room. There are two of us. We're on opposite ends of the laundry room. We're communicating. So let us stop using that social distancing and start calling it physical distancing, and then keep connected. I mean, a lot of Broadway people are getting online. They're performing for each other from different places. They're holding concerts in their own living rooms, for just whoever's online. They're doing a lot of wonderful, wonderful things just to keep connected, which goes back to that physical distancing, not social. And we have the capability of keeping in touch. Granted, it's not the same as holding each other's hands, but at least we can see each other and we can talk. It's vital. We're animals. We're social animals. We have to have contact. And short of someone holding you, at least you can talk to someone.
I love that. What a beautiful way to end tonight, that idea of staying connected. And for, of course, singers, hopefully staying connected as part of that would be through singing and through music. And so I really appreciate all of your time this evening. Thank you so very, very much. And your expertise. It's such an important subject. And it's been such a privilege the last 2 weeks for me to do these special edition NATS chats to acknowledge what's happening in our history right now. So thank you for being a part of that. And attendees, thank you for joining us. And we will see you in a couple weeks for a regularly scheduled NATS chat. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Attendees, stay on the line for a minute, okay? I mean, my panelists, will you stay on the line for a moment? The recording stopped, so give